The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dry and dusty expanse of the Nevada desert. The air shimmered with heat, making the horizon wobble like water. It was quiet. Too quiet. No birds chirped, no wind stirred the sagebrush. The only sound came from the hum of generators at Area 52, a top-secret military base hidden deep within the barren landscape. Scientists and soldiers moved briskly between tents and trailers, their faces tense with anticipation. For years, humanity had dreamed of this moment. First contact. Aliens. Visitors from another world. Books had been written about it, movies made, theories debated endlessly online. But now, as an enormous silver ship descended silently from the sky, reality hit hard. This wasn't fiction anymore. Daniel Carter stood near the edge of the landing zone, his hands shoved into the pockets of his khaki pants. He was tall but not imposing, with thinning brown hair and glasses that always seemed smudged despite his best efforts to keep them clean. His job title was linguist, though he often joked that people thought he just taught high school Spanish. In truth, Daniel specialized in ancient languages, ones so old they hadn't been spoken for thousands of years. Dead tongues, buried, under layers of time, waiting for someone curious enough to dig them up again. Next to him stood Rachel Monroe, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She was shorter than Daniel, with curly black hair pulled back into a messy bun and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. Rachel worked as an astrophysicist, studying stars and planets far beyond Earth's reach. Her research focused on strange signals coming from distant galaxies, patterns that didn't quite match anything natural or human-made. She had spent countless nights staring through telescopes, wondering if anyone out there might be looking back. Together, they were part of a team assembled by the government to figure out what to do when and if the aliens ever arrived. No. One expected it to happen so soon. The ship loomed above them now, massive and alien in every sense of the word. Its surface gleamed like polished steel, reflecting the sunlight in ways that hurt the eyes. There were no visible windows or doors, no seams or joints where panels might open. It looked less like a machine and more like a living thing, smooth and fluid, shifting slightly as though breathing. A hush fell over the crowd as a section of the ship began to glow brighter, then split apart with a soft hiss. A ramp extended, downward, touching the ground gently without a sound. Everyone held their breath. Then they appeared. They were tall, much taller than any human, and impossibly thin, their limbs moving with an unnatural grace. Their skin shimmered faintly blue, almost translucent, and their large almond-shaped eyes glowed softly, like lanterns lit from within. They wore sleek suits that seemed to blend into their bodies, shimmering with subtle colors that shifted depending on how the light hit them. At the front of the group stood one who seemed to be their leader. His presence commanded attention, even from a distance. He stepped forward confidently, his movements precise and deliberate. Behind him others followed, forming a loose semicircle around him. "Welcome," said General Harker, stepping forward to meet them. His voice boomed across the clearing, amplified by a microphone clipped to his uniform. "On behalf of all humanity, we greet you." The alien leader raised a hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, from a small device strapped to his wrist, came a voice. Not his own, but mechanical, cold, and emotionless. "You are primitive," the voice said, echoing slightly. "Your kind is beneath us." Gasps rippled through the gathered crowd. Some people shifted uncomfortably, others exchanged nervous glances. Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. He glanced at Rachel, who looked equally stunned. "We have observed your species for many cycles," the voice continued. "You fight among yourselves. You destroy your home. You cling to superstition and fear. We are here only to witness your end." The words hung heavy in the air, sharp and cruel. Around them, soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons, though none dared raise them. The aliens radiated an aura of superiority, as if they knew they could crush humanity with little effort. But Daniel noticed something else. As the alien leader spoke, his body language changed subtly. His gestures became more animated, his head tilting slightly as if listening to something only he could hear, and the rhythm of the translated voice, it wasn't random. There was a pattern to it, a cadence that reminded Daniel of something ancient, something familiar. He turned to Rachel, leaning close so no one else could hear. "Did you catch that?" he whispered. "Catch what?" she replied, still staring at the aliens. "The way he's speaking. The phrasing. It's structured. Almost ceremonial." Rachel frowned, focusing harder. After a moment, her eyes widened. "You're right. It's like chanting." Daniel nodded slowly. An idea began to form in his mind, fragile and half-formed, but exciting nonetheless. He had spent years studying dead languages, piecing together fragments of forgotten civilizations. Could it be possible that these aliens weren't entirely foreign? That somewhere in their speech lay echoes of Earth's past? As the alien leader continued his monologue, dismissing humanity as insignificant, Daniel slipped away from the group unnoticed. He hurried back to the makeshift lab set up inside one of the trailers, pulling out notebooks filled with scribbled notes and diagrams. Ancient scripts covered the pages, Sumerian cuneiform Egyptian hieroglyphs, runes carved into stone millennia ago. Rachel joined him a few minutes later, carrying a tablet loaded with data from her observations. "What are you thinking?" she asked, setting the device down on the cluttered table. "I'm thinking," Daniel said, flipping through his notes, "that maybe these guys aren't as alien as they seem. Look at this." He pointed to a series of symbols drawn hastily in pencil. "This pattern matches markings I've seen in Mesopotamian tablets. And listen to this." He replayed a recording of the alien leader's speech, isolating a single phrase. "Doesn't that sound like Proto-Indo-European?" Rachel leaned closer, her brow furrowed in concentration. "You're saying their language has roots in ours?" "Not exactly ours," Daniel corrected, "but maybe our ancestors. What if these aliens visited Earth before, long before recorded history? What if they left traces behind?" Rachel sat back, processing the implications. If Daniel was right, it meant humanity wasn't as alone in the universe as everyone thought. It also meant the aliens walking among them now weren't gods or monsters. They were just another piece of Earth's story. But why would they come back now, she wondered aloud. And why act like they're better than us? "That's the question, isn't it?" Daniel murmured, tapping his pen against the desk. "Maybe they're scared, or maybe they're hiding something." Outside, the aliens boarded their ship, leaving the humans standing in stunned silence. The ramp retracted, the glowing seam sealed shut, and with a soft hum the vessel lifted off the ground, disappearing into the sky. Back at the lab, Daniel and Rachel worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and adrenaline. They compared linguistic patterns, cross-referenced archaeological findings, and mapped star charts onto ancient maps of the heavens. Each discovery brought them closer to understanding the truth, but also deeper into territory no one had dared explore before. By dawn, they had enough evidence to support their theory. The aliens' language bore unmistakable similarities to Earth's oldest known tongues. More importantly, their behavior suggested they believed humans incapable of recognizing those connections. Arrogance masked vulnerability. Mockery hid fear. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trailer's windows, Daniel looked up from his notes and met Rachel's gaze. "We can use this," he said quietly. "If we learn their language, if we speak it, they won't see us as primitives anymore." Rachel nodded, determination hardening her expression. "Let's prove them wrong." The days following the aliens' departure were a blur of activity for Daniel and Rachel. They barely slept, their minds racing with possibilities. The rest of the team at Area 52 was busy analyzing data collected during the encounter, scans of the alien ship, recordings of its movements, and samples of the strange energy it emitted. But Daniel and Rachel had something else on their minds, something bigger. They retreated to a small trailer tucked away from the main hub of activity, where they could work in peace. The walls were lined with whiteboards covered in scribbled notes, maps, and diagrams. In the center of the room stood a table cluttered with books, papers, and laptops. A pot of coffee brewed constantly, its bitter aroma filling the air. Daniel sat hunched over his laptop, playing back the recording of the alien leader's speech. He listened intently, pausing every few seconds to jot down notes. Rachel paced behind him, her arms crossed tightly as she thought aloud. "It's not just Proto-Indo-European," she said, stopping mid-stride. "There are elements here that remind me of other ancient languages too. Look at this phrase, it matches patterns found in Sumerian texts." Daniel nodded without looking up. "And this rhythm? It's almost musical, like a chant or a prayer." Rachel grabbed a marker and started drawing on the whiteboard. She sketched out symbols and connected them with arrows, creating a web of relationships between Earth's oldest languages and the phrases spoken by the aliens. "What if they're not just borrowing from our past?" she suggested. "What if they're quoting it?" Daniel paused the recording and turned to face her. "You mean like sacred texts? Rituals?" "Exactly. Think about it. If they visited Earth thousands of years ago, maybe they left behind teachings or warnings. And maybe those teachings got passed down through generations, even after people forgot where they came from." Daniel leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "That would explain why so many ancient cultures have similar myths about gods descending from the sky. But why would they come back now, after all this time?" Rachel shrugged. "Maybe they're checking up on us, or maybe—" She trailed off, her voice softening. "Maybe they need something." The thought hung heavy in the air. Neither of them wanted to say it outright, but the possibility was hard to ignore. What if the aliens weren't explorers or observers? What if they were invaders? For hours they debated and brainstormed, piecing together fragments of evidence. By the time night fell, they had a plan. It was risky, untested, and wildly ambitious, but it was all they had. The next morning, Daniel called a meeting with General Harker and the rest of the research team. The general was skeptical at first, pacing back and forth as Daniel explained their theory. "You're telling me these aliens speak some kind of ancient human language?" Harker asked, his tone dripping with disbelief. "Not exactly," Daniel replied calmly. "We think their language has roots in ours, or rather, in the languages of our ancestors. There's overlap, patterns we can recognize. And you believe learning this language will give us an advantage?" Harker pressed. "Yes," Rachel chimed in. "If we can communicate with them directly, using their own words, we might be able to change their perception of us. Show them we're not as primitive as they think." Harker studied them for a moment, his jaw tight. Finally he sighed. "All right, I'll authorize the resources you need, but if this doesn't work, we're running out of options." With the general's approval, Daniel and Rachel threw themselves into their task. They spent days poring over ancient manuscripts, comparing them to recordings of the aliens' speech. Progress was slow and frustrating, but little by little they began to make sense of it. One breakthrough came when Rachel noticed a recurring phrase in the alien leader's speech. At first it seemed meaningless, a string of syllables strung together without context. But then Daniel recognized it. It matched a line from an ancient Egyptian hymn praising the sun god Ra. "This isn't random," Daniel said excitedly, pointing to the screen. "They're quoting religious texts, sacred writings. This is deliberate." Rachel nodded, her eyes lighting up. "Which means they value these words. They carry weight." Encouraged by the discovery, they pushed harder. Daniel practiced pronouncing the reconstructed phrases, repeating them until his throat hurt. Rachel coached him, correcting his accent and helping him refine the rhythm. It wasn't easy. The language was complex, full of subtle nuances that didn't exist in modern tongues. But Daniel was determined. Meanwhile, Rachel worked on predicting the aliens' next move. Using data gathered during the initial encounter, she tracked their ship's trajectory and analyzed its energy signature. She cross-referenced this information with historical records of unidentified aerial phenomena, searching for patterns. After several sleepless nights, she identified a potential landing site, Mount Shasta, California. "They're coming back," she announced one evening, spreading a map across the table. Here, near the mountain. We can intercept them. Daniel nodded, though his stomach churned with nerves. Are you sure about this? As sure as I can be, Rachel replied. We've got one shot at this. If we mess it up. She didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what was at stake. The journey to Mount Shasta was tense. A convoy of military vehicles carried the team to the designated location, where they set up camp under the cover of darkness. The mountain loomed above them, its snow-capped peak glowing faintly in the moonlight. Somewhere nearby, hidden among the trees, the aliens waited. Daniel spent the night rehearsing the phrases he'd memorized, whispering them under his breath as he walked along the edge of the clearing. Rachel stayed close, offering encouragement and reminding him to stay calm. Around them, soldiers stood guard, their weapons ready but unused for now. As dawn broke, the silence was shattered by the sound of engines humming softly in the distance. The ground trembled slightly as another alien ship descended from the sky, touching down gently in a nearby meadow. The ramp lowered, and once again, the tall, shimmering figures emerged. This time, Daniel stepped forward, leaving the safety of the group. His heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to focus. He raised his hands slowly, palms open, to show he meant no harm. Then, taking a deep breath, he began to speak. At first, his voice wavered, unsure. The words felt strange on his tongue, unfamiliar and awkward. But as he continued, his confidence grew. The rhythm clicked into place, the cadence flowing naturally. He spoke the phrases Rachel had helped him learn, quoting lines from ancient prayers and chants. The aliens froze, their glowing eyes widening in shock. Their leader, the same one who had mocked humanity days earlier, stared at Daniel, his expression unreadable. For a moment there was only silence. Then Kalor, the alien leader, spoke. His voice came through the translator device, cold and sharp. How do you know these words? Daniel hesitated, then responded in English. Because they're part of our history. Your ancestors brought them to us. You may have forgotten, but we remember. Kalor tilted his head, studying Daniel as if seeing him for the first time. Impossible, he said finally. Your kind lacks the intellect to comprehend such things. We're smarter than you think, Rachel interjected, stepping forward to join Daniel. And we're not afraid of you anymore. For a long moment no one moved. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Then slowly, Kalor lowered his hand, signaling his warriors to stand down. You intrigue me, he admitted, his voice tinged with curiosity. Perhaps we underestimated you. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a start. Daniel and Rachel exchanged a glance, relief washing over them. They had taken the first step toward bridging the gap between two worlds, and for the first time the aliens seemed willing to listen. Back at the camp, as the sun rose higher in the sky, the team celebrated quietly. Soldiers shook hands, scientists hugged, and Rachel poured herself a cup of coffee, finally allowing herself to relax. But Daniel remained thoughtful. He stared at the alien ship in the distance, its metallic surface gleaming in the sunlight. He knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead. Still, as he sipped his coffee and watched the horizon, he allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had proven it could adapt, survive, and rise to meet even the most daunting challenges. And maybe, just maybe, the aliens would learn something from them too. The alien ship stood motionless in the meadow, its surface reflecting the morning sunlight like a mirror. The air around it was still, unnaturally quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Soldiers kept their distance, their weapons slung over their shoulders but ready to be raised at a moment's notice. Scientists huddled near the edge of the clearing, whispering among themselves and jotting down notes. But all eyes were on Daniel and Rachel, who stood face to face with Kalor, the leader of the Valens. Kalor's glowing blue eyes narrowed as he studied them, his expression unreadable. He tilted his head slightly as though trying to decipher some hidden meaning behind their actions. Finally, he spoke through his translator device, his mechanical voice cold but tinged with curiosity. "You claim to remember," Kalor said, his words deliberate. "Yet your kind is fleeting, fragile. How could you preserve what we have forgotten?" Daniel took a deep breath, steadying himself. He glanced at Rachel, who nodded encouragingly. Then he turned back to Kalor, meeting the alien's gaze without flinching. "Because we're storytellers," Daniel replied. "Humans may not live long, but we pass knowledge from one generation to the next. We carve it into stone, write it on paper, paint it on walls. Even when we don't understand it anymore, we keep it safe." Rachel stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "And because we adapt. We take what we find, what others leave behind, and make it our own. Your ancestors gave us pieces of their language, their ideas. We didn't just bury them. We built on them." Kalor stared at them for a long moment, his body perfectly still. Then he turned to the other Vaylans, exchanging soft, melodic sounds that no human could understand. The aliens moved fluidly, their shimmering forms blending together like watercolors on a canvas. Whatever they discussed, it seemed urgent. When Kalor turned back to Daniel and Rachel, his tone had shifted. It wasn't friendly. Nothing about him suggested warmth, but there was a hint of respect in his voice now. "You intrigue me," he admitted. "But intrigue alone does not change the truth. Your species is young, reckless. You poison your world, wage endless wars. Why should we care what becomes of you?" Rachel clenched her fists, biting back an angry retort. She knew better than to let emotion get the better of her. Instead, she chose her words carefully. "Because survival isn't guaranteed," she said. "Not for anyone, not even for you. Look at your ship. It's advanced, yes, but it's also damaged. You came here for a reason, didn't you? Something forced you to leave your home." Kalor's eyes flickered just for a second, but it was enough. Daniel caught it too. They exchanged a glance, silently agreeing to press their advantage. "We can help each other," Daniel added quickly. "You've underestimated us, but maybe that's a mistake. Maybe we can offer something you need." For the first time, Kalor hesitated. His glowing form dimmed slightly, as if his energy wavered under the weight of uncertainty. He gestured to one of his companions, who stepped forward and handed him a small, glowing orb. Kalor held it up, studying it intently before speaking. Again. "Our world is dying," he admitted, his voice softer now. "We sought refuge among the stars, hoping to find new beginnings. But every planet we encounter is either barren or hostile." He paused, looking directly at Daniel. "Your Earth is rich with resources. Yet your people squander them, destroy them. We thought you unworthy of salvation." Rachel shook her head. "That's not fair. Yes, humans make mistakes. But we're learning. We're trying to fix things. And if you'd stopped mocking us long enough to listen, you might have realized that." Kalor's lips curled into what might have been the closest thing to a smile a Valen could manage. Bold words for such a fragile species. "They're true," Daniel insisted. "If you give us a chance, we can prove it. Work with us instead of against us. Together we might find solutions neither of us could achieve alone." The conversation stretched on for hours, though it felt much longer. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting sharp shadows across the meadow. Soldiers shifted uncomfortably, their patience wearing thin, but no one dared interrupt. This was bigger than any single person. It was about two species deciding whether to cooperate or collide. As the discussion continued, Rachel noticed something strange. The Vaylans' gestures, the way they moved their hands, tilted their heads, even blinked their glowing eyes, seemed oddly familiar. She whispered to Daniel, pulling him aside for a moment. "Look at them," she said, pointing discreetly. "Their body language matches descriptions in ancient texts. People used to think gods or spirits communicated this way. What if they're using more than just speech? What if they're signaling subconsciously?" Daniel nodded slowly, realization dawning on him. "It's like they're speaking two languages at once, one verbal, one physical. if we can decode both. They returned to the group, armed with a new strategy. Rachel began mimicking the Vaylon's movements, subtle enough not to seem confrontational, but clear enough to catch Kalor's attention. At first, he frowned, confused, but when Daniel spoke again, weaving ancient phrases with modern appeals, Kalor's demeanor softened further. "You are persistent," Kalor said finally, "perhaps too persistent to ignore." Rachel seized the opportunity. "Then let us work together. Share your knowledge and we'll share ours. Teach us how to heal our planet, and we'll help you save yours." Kalor exchanged another series of melodic clicks with his companions, then turned back to the humans. "Very well," he said. "A trial period. Prove your worth, and we will reconsider our stance." The tension in the air eased slightly, though no one relaxed completely. Soldiers lowered their weapons cautiously, and scientists began setting up equipment to document everything. Daniel and Rachel exchanged a quick, triumphant smile. They had done it. For now, at least, humanity had bought itself a reprieve. Over. The next few days, the team worked tirelessly alongside the Vaylons. They set up a temporary base near the landing site, where researchers could study the aliens' technology while sharing their own findings. Daniel focused on language, teaching the Vaylons fragments of human speech while continuing to refine his understanding of theirs. Rachel collaborated with the aliens' engineers, analyzing their methods for sustainable energy production and comparing them to Earth-based solutions. It wasn't easy. Misunderstandings happened frequently, sometimes leading to frustration on both sides. But slowly, trust began to build. The Vaylons revealed that their ship was powered by a form of quantum energy derived from starlight, a resource abundant in space but scarce on Earth. In return, Rachel showed them how humans were experimenting with solar panels and wind turbines, explaining the challenges of scaling these technologies globally. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Daniel found himself sitting beside Kalor near the edge of the meadow. The alien leader was silent, staring at the distant mountains, his glowing form dimmed to a soft hum. "Do you miss your home?" Daniel asked quietly. Kalor turned. To him, his expression unreadable. "It is gone," he said simply. "Our oceans dried up, our skies turned black. We lingered too long, hoping for miracles that never came." "I'm sorry," Daniel replied sincerely. "I can't imagine what that must feel like." Kalor studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You have shown courage, Daniel Carter. Perhaps your kind is capable of growth after all." The compliment caught Daniel off guard, and he smiled faintly. "Thank you. That means a lot." As night fell, the camp buzzed with activity. Researchers pored over data, soldiers patrolled the perimeter, and the Vaylons worked silently on repairs to their ship. Despite the progress, everyone knew the truce was fragile. Trust took time to build, and one wrong move could shatter it entirely. Rachel joined Daniel later, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one and sat down beside him, gazing at the stars. "What do you think happens next?" she asked softly. Daniel shrugged, sipping his drink. Everything tasted bitter compared to the relief flooding through him. "I don't know, but for the first time I feel like we have a shot. A real shot." Rachel nodded, her green eyes reflecting the light of the moon. "Yeah, me too." In the distance, the Vaylon ship pulsed gently, its glow steady and reassuring. For now, the future remained uncertain. But for the first time in history, 2 vastly different species stood on the brink of collaboration, not conquest. Weeks turned into months, and the partnership between humans and Vaylons grew stronger. The meadow near Mount Shasta became a hub of activity, bustling with scientists, engineers, and soldiers working side by side with the tall, shimmering aliens. Tents and trailers had been replaced by more permanent structures, modular labs and communication centers designed to accommodate both species. The air buzzed with energy, not just from machines but from the shared sense of purpose. Daniel and Rachel were at the heart of it all. Daniel continued to refine his understanding of the Velan language, teaching them basic English phrases in return. He marveled at how quickly they picked up human speech, their glowing eyes lighting up whenever they managed to string together a sentence. Rachel worked closely with the Velan's engineers, learning about their advanced technology, while sharing Earth's own innovations. Together, they developed plans for projects that could benefit both worlds. One project stood out above the rest, a joint effort to create sustainable energy solutions. The Velans revealed that their ships were powered by quantum reactors capable of harvesting starlight, a concept far beyond anything humanity had achieved. However, these reactors required rare materials found only in deep space, making them impractical for widespread use on Earth. Rachel suggested combining the Velan's design with solar panel technology, creating hybrid systems that could harness sunlight more efficiently. It's risky, Rachel admitted during one late-night meeting. But if it works, we could revolutionize renewable energy. Clean power for everyone. Kaylor listened intently, his head tilted slightly as he processed her words. Your idea has merit, he said finally. But implementation will require trust. Both sides must contribute equally. We're ready, Daniel replied firmly. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about proving we can work together. The decision was made. Teams of humans and Velans began collaborating on prototypes, testing new materials, and refining designs. Progress was slow but steady, fueled by determination and mutual respect. For the first time, it felt like they were truly building something, not just for themselves, but for future generations. As the experiments progressed, tensions occasionally flared. Not everyone trusted the Velans, and not all Velans trusted humans. Some soldiers whispered about potential betrayal, while certain members of the research team worried the aliens might exploit Earth's resources once the project was complete. Even Kaylor faced resistance from within his ranks. Some of his warriors believed cooperating with humans was a mistake, but Daniel and Rachel refused to let fear derail their efforts. They organized meetings between the two groups, encouraging open dialogue and addressing concerns directly. Slowly, barriers began to break down. Soldiers started seeing the Velans not as invaders but as partners. Scientists discovered common ground in their shared love of discovery. And Kaylor himself softened, his initial arrogance giving way to genuine curiosity about humanity. One evening, as the sun set over the mountains, Rachel found Kaylor standing alone near the edge of the camp. His glowing form was dimmer than usual, almost subdued. She approached cautiously, unsure whether her presence would be welcome. "Can I join you?" she asked softly. Kaylor nodded, gesturing for her to sit beside him. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the last rays of sunlight fade into darkness. Finally, Kaylor spoke. "I underestimated your kind," he admitted, his voice low. "When we arrived, I saw only chaos, war, destruction. But now I see something else. Resilience." Rachel smiled faintly. "Humans aren't perfect. We make mistakes, big ones, but we learn from them. That's what keeps us going." Kaylor turned to her, his glowing eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Perhaps there is hope for us yet." Their conversation marked a turning point. From that day forward, cooperation became smoother, more natural. Humans and Velans worked seamlessly together, blending their strengths to overcome challenges. The prototype energy system took shape, its sleek design incorporating elements of both cultures. Panels resembling Velan armor housed cutting-edge human electronics, symbolizing unity rather than division. Finally, the day came to test the system. A crowd gathered around the installation site, anticipation crackling in the air. Soldiers stood at attention. Scientists held clipboards and Velans watched silently, their forms shimmering faintly in the morning light. At the center of it all stood Daniel and Rachel, ready to oversee the activation process. "Are you nervous?" Daniel asked, glancing at Rachel. "A little," she admitted, gripping the edge of her clipboard tightly. "But mostly excited. If this works, it will. Daniel interrupted confidently. "We've put everything into this, trust me." With a nod, Rachel signaled the start of the test. Engineers flipped switches and the panels hummed to life, glowing softly as they absorbed sunlight. Data streamed across monitors, showing efficiency levels higher than anyone had predicted. Cheers erupted from the crowd as the system stabilized, producing clean, reliable energy. Kaylor stepped forward, his expression unreadable. For a moment, no one spoke. Then he raised a hand, silencing the celebration. "This achievement belongs to both our peoples," he declared, his mechanical voice carrying across the clearing. "It proves that cooperation is possible, even between those who seem worlds apart." His words brought renewed applause, louder and more heartfelt this time. Daniel and Rachel exchanged a glance, pride swelling in their chests. They had done it. Against all odds, they had bridged the gap between species. In the weeks that followed, plans were made for the next phase of collaboration. The Valens agreed to share their knowledge of interstellar travel, offering guidance on how humanity could explore beyond Earth's orbit. In return, humans promised to help the Valens adapt their technology to suit Earth's environment, ensuring sustainability for both races. As preparations continued, Kaylor announced that the Valens would soon depart, leaving behind a small contingent to oversee ongoing projects. Their mission, to find a new home, remained unchanged, but their perspective had shifted. No longer did they view humanity as inferior or irrelevant. Instead, they saw potential allies, partners in a shared journey toward survival. On the day of their departure, the entire camp gathered to bid farewell. Soldiers saluted, scientists waved, and children held up handmade signs thanking the Valens for their help. Daniel and Rachel stood at the front of the crowd, watching as Kaylor approached them one last time. "You have earned my respect," Kaylor said, his voice softer than usual. "Do not squander it." "We won't," Rachel promised. "And thank you for trusting us." Kaylor nodded, then turned to address the group. "Until we meet again, may your path be bright." With that, he boarded the ship, followed by the other Valens. The ramp retracted, the hull glowed brighter, and with a soft hum, the vessel ascended into the sky. Everyone watched until it disappeared among the stars. Afterward, Daniel and Rachel walked back to the lab, their steps slow and thoughtful. The camp felt quieter without the Valens, but their absence wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. "So," Daniel said finally, breaking the silence. "What's next?" Rachel smiled, her green eyes sparkling with determination. "We keep going. There's still so much to do." He nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they stepped inside the lab, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Humanity had proven itself capable of greatness, not through conquest or domination, but through connection and collaboration. And somewhere out there, among the stars, the Valens carried with them a reminder of what they had learned from Earth, that even the most distant ancestors leave echoes behind, waiting to be heard by those willing to listen. Months passed since the Valens' departure, and life at the Mount Shasta Research Facility settled into a new rhythm. The sense of urgency that had driven everyone during the aliens' stay gave way to steady progress. The hybrid energy system they had developed together worked flawlessly, producing clean power for nearby towns and sparking interest from governments around the world. For the first time in years, hope replaced fear when people talked about the future. Daniel and Rachel became household names, their faces appearing on news channels and magazine covers. Scientists hailed them as pioneers, while ordinary citizens saw them as symbols of humanity's potential. But despite the attention, they remained grounded, focusing on their work rather than fame. They knew the real challenge lay ahead, keeping the partnership with the Valens alive, even across the vast distances of space. Communication with the Valens was sporadic, but meaningful. Using advanced transmitters left behind by Kaylor's crew, Daniel sent messages in both English and reconstructed tongue. The responses were slow to our immense distance between Earth and wherever the Valens traveled. Still, each message brought excitement and renewed determination. One evening, As the sun dipped below the horizon, Rachel sat in the lab reviewing data from the latest transmission. Her fingers tapped rhythmically on the desk as she read through the alien symbols, translating them into something resembling human language. Beside her, Daniel leaned over a map of the galaxy, tracing possible routes the Valens might have taken based on star charts provided in earlier exchanges. "They're heading toward Proxima Centauri," Daniel said suddenly, pointing to a cluster of stars near the edge of the map. "Look at this pattern. It matches the coordinates they mentioned." Rachel glanced up, her eyes narrowing as she studied the chart. "That makes sense. If they're looking for habitable planets, that's one of the closest systems." "But it's still light years away," Daniel added, frowning. "Even with their technology, it'll take them decades to get there." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "Decades for them. But what if we could help speed things up? What if we found a way to send supplies or resources?" The idea hung in the air, bold and ambitious. Humanity didn't yet possess the ability to travel beyond its own solar system, but the thought of contributing to the Valan's survival filled them with purpose. It wasn't just about helping another species, it was about proving that cooperation could transcend boundaries, whether physical or cultural. The next morning, Daniel and Rachel called a meeting with General Harker and the rest of the research team. The room buzzed with anticipation as they laid out their proposal: to build a spacecraft capable of carrying supplies to the Valans, using technology adapted from the knowledge shared during their collaboration. "It's risky," Daniel admitted, pacing in front of the whiteboard. "We don't know exactly where they are or how long it will take to reach them, but if we can pull it off, it could change everything." Harker frowned, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "You're talking about launching an interstellar mission, a first for humanity. Do we even have the resources?" "We do," Rachel interjected confidently. "The Valens gave us blueprints for quantum reactors. We've already started modifying them to power smaller vessels. With enough funding and manpower, we can make this happen." The general hesitated, glancing at the others in the room. Some nodded in agreement, others looked skeptical. Finally, he sighed and rubbed his temples. "All right. I'll authorize the project, but you'd better deliver results." With the green light, the team threw themselves into the task. Engineers worked tirelessly to design a prototype ship, incorporating elements from both human and Valan technology. Materials scientists experimented with alloys strong enough to withstand the harsh conditions of deep space, while programmers wrote code to automate navigation systems. Every day brought new challenges, but also breakthroughs. Daniel focused on preparing the payload, a mix of practical supplies and symbolic gestures. He included tools and equipment the Valans might need, along with samples of Earth's art, music, and literature. "They should know who we are," he explained when questioned about the seemingly unnecessary items, "not just what we can offer." Rachel supervised the construction of the reactor core, ensuring it could generate enough energy to propel the ship across unimaginable distances. Late nights became routine, with coffee pots perpetually brewing and laptops glowing softly under fluorescent lights. Despite the exhaustion, morale remained high. Everyone felt they were part of something bigger than themselves. As the months dragged on, the project began taking shape. The ship, christened Unity, stood tall in a specially constructed hangar near the research facility. Its sleek design combined human engineering with Valan aesthetics, blending sharp angles with fluid curves. Solar panels lined its surface, ready to absorb starlight, while the reactor hummed softly within its core. On the day of the launch, the entire camp gathered outside the hangar. Soldiers stood at attention, researchers hugged loved ones, and children waved flags decorated with images of Earth and the Valan's glowing forms. Cameras flashed as reporters documented the historic event. Daniel and Rachel stood at the front of the crowd, watching as technicians performed final checks on the ship. Their hearts raced with a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was it, the culmination of months of hard work and sacrifice. If successful, the mission would mark a turning point not just for humanity, but for interspecies relations. Finally, the countdown began. Voices echoed through speakers as numbers ticked down. 10, 9, 8. Each second felt like an eternity. By the time 0 was reached, the air vibrated with tension. The engines roared to life, sending shockwaves rippling through the ground. Flames erupted from the base of the ship, illuminating the night sky. Slowly, impossibly, Unity lifted off the ground, climbing higher and higher until it disappeared into the heavens. Cheers erupted from the crowd, tears streaming down faces. Soldiers saluted, scientists embraced, and children gazed upward, dreaming of the stars. Daniel and Rachel stood side by side, holding hands tightly as they watched their creation vanish into the void. "We did it," Rachel whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yeah," Daniel replied, squeezing her hand. "But the real test is yet to come." Weeks turned into months as the team waited anxiously for confirmation that Unity had reached its destination. Messages sent via relay satellites provided updates on the ship's progress, but communication delays made real-time tracking impossible. Patience wore thin, and doubts crept in. Had the ship malfunctioned? Would the Valens receive it? Then one evening, a transmission arrived. Static crackled through the speakers before resolving into a familiar mechanical voice. "This is Kaelor," it said. "Your vessel has reached us. We are grateful." The room erupted in cheers. Technicians hugged, scientists cried, and soldiers raised fists in triumph. Daniel and Rachel exchanged a look, relief washing over them like a wave. Kaelor continued, his tone softer now. "Your gift honors us. It proves that trust can bridge even the greatest divides. Together, we will find a way forward." Rachel stepped closer to the microphone, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "Thank you, Kaelor. This isn't the end. It's the beginning." As the transmission ended, the team celebrated late into the night. Music played, food was shared, and stories were told beneath a sky scattered with stars. For the first time, those stars no longer seemed so distant. They represented connection, possibility, and hope. In the weeks that followed, plans were made for future missions. Humanity had taken its first steps beyond the solar system, guided by lessons learned from the Valens. And though challenges remained, the path forward was clearer than ever. Daniel and Rachel stood together one last time, gazing upward at the endless expanse above. Somewhere out there, the Valens journeyed toward a new home, carrying with them a piece of Earth and leaving behind a legacy of unity. "We've only scratched the surface," Daniel said quietly. Rachel smiled, leaning against him. "And that's the best part. There's so much more to discover." Together, they turned back toward the lab, ready to face whatever came next. Humanity's story among the stars had just begun.